My name is Jerry Yoshioka. I'm RHS, Hazardous Materials Specialist II with Contra Costa Health Services Hazardous Materials. Let's see. Oop. Didn't transfer over. My contact information was supposed to be there, but it got wiped out somehow. My phone number is 925-335-3200. I've got roughly 20 years in tanks. Originally came out of San Joaquin County, 6.5 years there, 14 years with Contra Costa County, and I'm the program lead in Contra Costa County, and I've been the co-chair for the Bay Area UST Tag for 3-4 years. Okay, tank lining basically came from the 1998 upgrades, and it's for motor vehicle fuels. It's the conversion from single wall tank to for motor vehicle fuels. They had the option of putting in a tank lining. So you had the option of either pulling the tank, putting secondary containment, which wasn't an option in California. In other states you could do that. You had interior lining coupled with cathodic protection, and this is for steel tanks. A fiberglass tank, single wall, motor vehicle fuels, you didn't have to do cathodic protection. Another option was put in an internal bladder, and last year I saw my first and only internal bladder tank, and that was being pulled in Berkeley, the city of Berkeley. So we're talking tank lining. You can use tank lining to satisfy 2662 of the regulations, or to repair a tank. Currently I've got a double wall tank that is undergoing a repair. It's a steel primary with a fiberglass secondary, and it's got a crack on the primary, and we're going to go in and use lining material to seal the crack. Usually when we fix a crack, we're welding a plate on it. In this case, because of the fiberglass outer shell, the secondary containment is fiberglass. You know, if you take a torch to it, you're going to melt that secondary containment. So we're using a lining material to seal the crack. Okay, so a tank that has been repaired using the interior lining method may not be repaired a second time with the interior lining method. It's a one-shot deal. If you line a tank for a repair, that's it. If the lining is deemed a failure at the 10-year mark, lining inspection, it's gone. It's going to have to be removed. If you have any questions, just ask. Okay, certification of the tank. If it's made out of a non-corrodible material, i.e. fiberglass, the tank has to be cleaned and no residue remains on the tank wall. Okay. It's a patch. So that is really up to the registered PE, the professional engineer. Most primary tanks, there's only usually the one crack. And I can let you know how it goes. Okay, for a non-corrodible tank, they have to take interior diameter measurements and to see if there's any compression in the tank. And they have to do an interior inspection. And they're checking to see for cracks, any damage to the fiberglass, if it needs additional reinforcement, etc. Okay. If the special inspector does not certify the tank, then you have the only other option is to pull the tank. Okay. In California, under Title 23, the special inspector is a registered professional engineer. Okay, so in the certification process, you have to have a vacuum test at 5.3 inches of mercury for no less than 1 minute. So they're putting on a vacuum on this tank, the tank that is to be lined, to see if it will hold. Okay, and this is all under the supervision of the special inspector. While they're in there doing the internal inspection, they're checking for the compression, tension cracking, etc. And if it does not meet certification requirements, the tank has to be closed. How many people have lined tanks in their jurisdiction? Okay, quite a few. Okay, if the tank is constructed of steel, it goes through the cleaning process, just like the fiberglass tank. But in this case, they're doing an abrasive blast to white metal. Okay, the metal surface has to be exposed. So you're getting down to white metal. The inspector is in there checking for holes and any other cracks. Okay. They're using a thickness gauge to determine how thick that metal plate is on that tank. Okay. The conditions for failure, 75% of the original wall thickness, meaning that the tank is too thin, or if the tank has any of the following defects. A split or crack at the seam longer than 3 inches, perforation larger than 1.5 inches in diameter, 5 or more perforations in any 1 square foot, multiple perforations larger than 1/2 inch in diameter. In San Joaquin County, where I was until 1997, we actually didn't have any line tanks, at least that I knew of. When I came over to Contra, Costa County, most of these tanks had already been lined for the 1998 upgrades. So I was around for the 10-year lining inspections. Corrosion, the owner or operator has to show to the local agency that the tank is suitable for lining and that there are no corrosion problems. Or if there are corrosion problems, that they can be corrected or fixed. Okay. Before lining a tank, thin areas or other flaws in the tanks have to be reinforced. Makes sense. Lining material, lining process shall be listed or certified by an independent third party. So the lining material has to go through a third party certification like a lot of the other tank components on our current tanks. So for the special inspector, they're checking for there again, discontinuity, compression, tension, cracking, corrosion, thickness, and for steel tanks, testing and lining using a holiday test. Okay, after they've done the test, there's another vacuum. After they've done the lining, they've done a vacuum test, and they also do a tank integrity test, a 0.1 gallon per hour test. Now for the process, that's all the certification by the special inspector. The actual process, you clean it, you purge it, you inert it, and you get all the stuff out. Okay, so technically, it's not one of these things where you can eat off the floor or whatever, but you got all the nastier stuff, out of the tank. Then you go in there and do the white metal blast. So they're in there sandblasting to the white metal so that they can, A, inspect the tank, and B, when they put the resin on the walls of the tank, there's something to stick to. My first few tank inspections or lining inspections, the contractor had done the white metal, except that his white metal he put X's on the walls. So there was a white metal X. Didn't touch anything else. So when he applied the lining material, it adhered to the white metal from the X's. But 10 years later, that lining material was on the floor of the tank. It just, there was not a good seal. So the fuel gets back there, air, whatever, and then pretty soon, it just starts splitting, coming off the walls and falling down. The white metal inspection. How many people have been inside of a tank? Quite a few. That's pretty good. Okay, this is my first time going in. And, needless to say, to go inside of a tank, it doesn't take a lot of brains to do that. This is what we found when we were inside. A number of leaks. And the fix to this was they just cleaned it up a little bit, and then they just re-welded the plates. It's another repair. Once they've passed the white metal inspection, then they spray coat the resin, the lining material. And then they do the hardness test. After the lining material has cured, they do a hardness test, a holiday test, and also a thickness test. Currently, there are three lining contractors that I'm aware of. You've got Northwest Tank Liners out of the Northwest, Washington or Oregon. Quality Fuel Services, they're out of the Central Valley and the foothills. And Session Tank Liners, Bakersfield, right? I think Bakersfield. Okay, this is when you open up the tank at the 10-year, something you don't want to see. This is a site where they just white metal the X's, the lining material. In fact, they lined the tanks on a weekend when our office wasn't available for an inspection. And 10 years later, they open it up, and the lining is on the bottom of the tank. Another bad lining. This is a picture of a tank in Richmond. There were a number of these little patches on the tank. The lining inspector went in, declared that the lining had failed, and therefore they had to reline this tank. Any questions as I'm, yeah. Yes. There's no limitation in the regulations for relining a tank. There's only limitations if you line the tank in order to do a repair. You get one shot. But technically in the regulations, you can line the tank over and over and over and over, as long as it passes certification. It starts it all over again. What was that? It isn't a repair. There hasn't been an unauthorized release. Remember, look at the definition of repair. Okay, so if they reline the tank, the clock starts. It gets reset for 10 years, and then 5 years after that, etc. Yeah.
Steel tanks for the purpose of, oh, I don't want that. No. It's on page 77.
Yes. You can line anything. There's no prohibition in the regulations from lining a fiberglass tank or a steel tank, or as long as it passes the certification. The holiday test. Yeah, that. Yeah. Okay, and the question was, in his jurisdiction, there was an issue about they couldn't do a spark, the holiday test. And the holiday test is you're taking a 30,000 volt squeegee and running it along or over the lining material. Doesn't sound that difficult, except that if you have a hole in that lining, which is known as a holiday, you get a spark. Unfortunately, if it's a lining inspection where the 10-year lining inspection, what happens is sometimes you'll get fuel behind that, between the lining material in the tank. And so if you're hitting it with something that's going to cause a spark, there's a tendency for an explosion. In what I guess in the 90s, they had an issue up north where they had an explosion. The person in the tank died, and the manhole watch was injured. I've had one contractor tell me that, no problem. I've got a low voltage holiday test. And I couldn't figure that out. And by the time that I figured that something was wrong, they had sealed up the tank and put fuel in it. Any other? Okay. Okay, the requirements after the tank has been lined, you have to have within 10 years another lining inspection. That's the first one. After you've passed that one, it's every 5 years thereafter. Currently, there is no limit to how long that 5-year cycle can go. 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, 5, So, and with the state not having cleanup fund money or whatever to issue grants or loans to remove these tanks, I think a lot of the facilities will just maintain that 5-year cycle. Yeah. Not in California. In Florida, they put in a honeycomb material that they call secondary containment. It hasn't been blessed in California. It's still deemed single wall. Okay, and the written certification to local agency within 30 days. Like most test reports in California, 99% of all test reports have to go to local agency, within 30 days. Okay, that 10-year 5-year lining certification, the tank has to be cleaned. No residue, no gunk on the walls. Another vacuum test at 5.3 inches of mercury. And they need to do a visual check of the interior of the lining of the tank and check the lining. So, like, how many have actually been on site when they're doing, all this? The cleaning, the purging, the guys going in and doing the lining inspection? It's sort of scary, isn't it? Most contractors, there's confined space, there's, PP issues, there's respiratory protection, all these things. It gets a little tense, and probably, except for the very end of the inspection, from an inspector perspective, you may not want to be there, or you might be behind a truck or some other sturdy, maybe behind a building or something. Okay, for a steel tank, you need to test, for the thickness of that lining material. So you have a very happy contractor there as he's conducting his test. This is the holiday test. They've got the squeegee, they've got on their belt, they have a battery pack, and when they hit a holiday, which is a bare spot in in that lining material, it sets off a nice spark. You can see it, and you can also hear it. And at the 10-year lining inspection, it gets a little bit dicey as far as safety-wise. Fiberglass tank, they're taking the cross section to see if there's any compression of the tank. And there you're also checking for the thickness and hardness of the lining. You're doing the holiday certification of the special inspector or coatings expert. What they are certifying is that the tank lining is good for the next 5 years. And you continue to use the material, use the tank for its intended purpose. Or what they will do is they will decertify that tank. Basically, the owner or operator has to close the tank. This is another bad lining, or lining that has failed. These are some scary slides that I shot from a contractor. This is the electrical cord. So this is their light that they drop down inside. It's held together with tape. I think it's the electrical tape, though. This is their extension cord with all these cracks on the wiring. This is their respirator. So when they go down there and doing the spraying or the white metal blast, this is the PPE that they wear. It's held, good old duct tape. This individual, he's going inside the tank. He's got a particulate filter mask, and his supervisor has a air purifying respirator and APR with cartridges. So I guess it depends on rank as far as who gets the better PPE. In fact, the individual on the left with the particulate filter, when he came out, his face was just covered with dust. So I offered him safety goggles, and I thought he'd put them on and say thank you, but he took them, and when I wasn't looking, he threw them away, and then he went back into the hole. I mean, it was like I offended him, giving him some safety equipment. Okay. This is part of what, during the spraying operation or when they're trying to put it on a patch. This is some of the stuff that they're using. They're using MEK. They're using this thing. This one here contains some kind of amine component. It's corrosive, may cause skin dermatitis or something like that. It's probably a liver killer or a kidney killer or whatever. And the one on the top, the stuff is not inert. The materials that they use have some hazards, and so this is one of their trucks. This this is on a, I think, well, they've got some things hanging up. Yeah, this is another site. I was inside. I thought it would be a good look. You know, this is, you're seeing a direct berry spill bucket. And you know, you got the bolt holes here. If they spray too thick on the ceilings, it drops. The material will drop before it dries or cures. So, you know, there is an art to this to make sure that you have nice uniform spread and that you don't put too much on, make it too thick. Here we have another shot from the end of the tank. You have, this is the turbine right there. And, you know, the striker plate here. You have measurements where they took some readings. He's taking readings and then he's marking the tank where he took the readings. Some of the equipment that they use to exhaust the atmosphere in the tank, or the explosive vapors in the tank. This is a Venturi. Basically what it does is just sucks out the air inside the tank and blows it up through the windsock and hopefully above any houses or any sources of ignition. This is another company's truck. It's a little more organized. Yeah.
Are these the contractors that you mentioned as being the three contractors that were qualified?
Yes. In California, there aren't a lot of choices. Three, and I've heard that there's another fourth coming in. Yes. Oh, it's Tank Tech, right? Yes. Tank Tech. That's the fourth one. So. Yes, but the company that was supposed to present was going to present his perspective. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it, and so in order to fill the slot, this is my perspective. This is what I have seen, and out in the field. I have not seen you. When I do see you, you know, so, you know, yeah, basically in California at today, February 7th, this is what's out there. You know, there's two or three, well, three, now coming up four. Right now, the three that are out there, two of them are like this. And, you know, those two are doing a lot of the, a good share of the work. Yeah.
Would this kind of work be considered acceptable by the inspectors in California? Why, if you say the answer is yes, why do you accept that kind of work?
Difficulty is, well, this is videotaped. The question is, why would a local agency accept this work? Part of it is, part of what is the problem is maybe is having probably more so to do with OSHA than the Title 23 requirements. They're using materials that are third-party certified. They have all their contractor's license. The lining inspector has all his paperwork, all his certificates. They're NACE certified, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So from the Title 23 aspect, it's really difficult. From an OSHA standpoint, I don't regulate OSHA. I can say, come back when you have a new extension cord. I'll be back when you have a new extension cord. You heard I don't know if you were here in the previous session, San Diego County was saying many times, we don't want that the facility to be shut down at a cost to the owner operator. So from an economic standpoint, you got to think, okay, owner operator, what, well, yeah, all these tanks have been grounded. Some of the photos I missed out. I didn't want to have a long thing. I figured that the shorter it was, the fewer the questions. But yeah, this is what I have seen, at least in Contra Costa County. Maybe our standards are not as high. We try to stick to what the regulations, what I can regulate. I'm not OSHA. I can refer it to OSHA, but by the time an OSHA inspector would come out, the company might be down the road. Yeah. Yeah, from a local agency standpoint, Janet was making the comment that it's sort of a balancing act. The local agency inspector may say that isn't safe. I don't feel that's safe. Whatever. But then again, on the other hand, that facility is not pumping fuel. Is not there's an economic thing there too. So, from a local agency inspector standpoint, you're sort of on the fence and trying to balance, to try to find a balance. Sometimes it works. This is a photo. It's hard to see. There's an individual inside the tank doing the holiday test. He's setting up the venturi. This site had very small footprint, so the equipment was pretty much, just crammed onto this, little facility. They're opening up the. This tank had previously been lined. It's at the 10-year inspection. They're opening the tank up. At least in my county, if they had to open up this, or if this were a single wall tank, steel tank, and they had to open up a new manway, the county fire department currently would say no. There's no cutting of tanks in my county. So back in '98, when this was done, or '97 when this was done, somehow they allowed it to happen, and so they put in the manway. Luckily, this one has a manway. We have a number of sites in my county that they don't know how the lining company got into the tank. There isn't any manhole. There's no place to on the tank, 4 tanks really, to figure out where they made the opening or how they accessed it. So they're going to have to break the entire slab to get to it. And all of you know, if you break concrete, that just means more money. This is a company at a major oil or medium oil. They've got the venturi, they've got the ventilation, etc. The person on the right is a welder that they came out of a union shop somewhere. And you can see a little flicker there. He's welding on the tank. This is a 10-year lining inspection. After taking the photo, I informed the contractor that I had a problem with this, and then went to the other side of the parking lot with my camera ready. This is the same site. A few years later, they pulled the tanks, and this was interesting because this is what we found on the tanks. It looks like there was a hole. It's opposite the fill, single wall tank. They take the inventory stick, pounding it through years and years, and pretty soon you eventually punch a hole. Now, what did that bring? 1998 upgrades said striker plates or drop tube mounted bottom protectors to prevent this from happening. Okay, they did a lining here, and this is, I guess, how they fixed the hole. They just sort of packed lining material into the hole. This occurred at 2 of the 4 tanks. This is another hole, another tank. This is what it looks like. And this is what it looks like inside. This is after we took a hammer and then pounded that little plug. So this had lining material around it, lining materials here, but when the plug got popped out, it took it with it. No. Well, I don't think from the lining, but from the previous hole, yes. Okay, question 1. A tank was lined in 1998. In 2008, the tank was opened and this was observed. What are the options? Okay, if the lining was not part of a repair, it can be relined. The other option is close the tank. What's wrong with this picture? Striker plates. No striker plates. What's the rule on striker plates? Striker plates have to be opposite all openings in the tank that you can put an inventory stick through. So all bung holes, all risers have to have a striker plate. So technically a tank has to have 3, 4, 5, 6 striker plates. Okay? Because you don't know where that fill port's going to be. What I found is during these lining inspections and whatever, or tank pulls, got a lot of these line tanks that didn't have any striker plates put in. You know, they've been working with like drop tube mounted bottom protectors or things like that. Okay, so I got you at 5 minutes after 4. Happy hour.